They say the strongest foundations are built on friendship. But what they never tell you is what happens when that foundation gets pulled in 3 directions at once. My name is Lauren Blake, and this is the story of how my husband's best friend became my business partner, and how everything that followed changed all of us. But before we dive in, if you love emotional layered stories full of unexpected twists, hit subscribe to Karma Encrypted. These are real human stories, and you're about to hear one that still makes my heart race. It started innocently enough, a dinner. Not a dramatic dinner. Not a last straw dinner. Just a regular Tuesday, 3 pasta bowls on the table, wine breathing in the corner, and my husband Jason ranting about his coworker again. And then there was Drew. Jason's best friend since college. The guy who always knew how to defuse Jason's grumpiness with a joke or a mock slap to the back of the head. But that night, Drew said something that stuck in my teeth like spinach. You know, Laure, you talk about opening your design agency like it's some dream. What if you actually did it? I blinked. Jason chuckled, dismissively. Yeah, if we had an extra $100,000 lying around. But Drew didn't laugh. He just looked at me, seriously plainly, and said, "What if I invested?" Jason dropped his fork. So did I. I thought it was a joke. Drew had always been supportive, cheerleading from the sidelines. But money? Business? That was a whole different game. I'm not joking, Drew said, his eyes meeting mine. You've had this plan drafted for what, 2 years? You've got clients asking for freelance work every month. You don't need a handout. You need runway. I can be that. Jason stayed quiet. And that silence? It was the first crack in a house I thought was built on concrete. By the end of the week, Drew and I were signing a basic partnership agreement. I offered 30% equity, but he pushed back. Settled at 20%. Said he didn't want control, he wanted me to soar. Jason. He smiled through it all. But something shifted in his posture every time Drew came by to discuss logistics. The day we launched was a blur of emails, coffee, and chaos. Within 48 hours, we had 5 contracts. By week 2, we had to hire a part-time assistant. And by the end of the first month, Drew turned to me and said, "Lauren, you're a rocket. I'm just lucky I'm strapped in." It should have been everything I dreamed. But dreams don't always account for dynamics. Jason's unease started quietly. He'd make passive jokes about my work husband. He'd roll his eyes when Drew texted me late to finalize a client pitch. And one night, he asked, "Do you two even need me around anymore?" I laughed. I tried to pull him close. But he pulled away. It's like you and Drew are on this island, and I'm just the guy who drops off snacks. I didn't know what to say. Because part of me understood. Drew got it. He believed in me before I even launched. He spoke my business language. Jason? He loved me. But he didn't understand the fire I'd been carrying for years. And now that it was lit, he was scared of the burn. But the line really blurred the night we landed the lock-in account. It was our biggest pitch yet. We were underdogs up against a legacy agency, but we won. Drew grabbed my hands and spun me in the middle of our tiny office. And in that moment, with confetti in the air, adrenaline rushing, we hugged. Tight. Not romantic. Not inappropriate. But maybe, a little too long. Because when I looked up, Jason was in the doorway. Unannounced. Watching. And his eyes? They weren't confused. They were certain. That night exploded in arguments. Jason accused me of replacing him. Of sharing more with Drew than with him. Of building a future that he wasn't part of. And I accused him of not trying to understand. Of treating my dream like a phase. Of resenting the man who stepped in, when he stepped back. It was the ugliest fight we'd ever had. And when he stormed out of the apartment, slamming the door so hard a frame cracked, I didn't chase him. I just sat on the floor. In a designer dress. Holding a glass of untouched champagne. Wondering if I had just chosen success over stability. Drew called the next morning. He okay? I didn't answer. We need to set boundaries. I'll back off. You two come first. But something in his voice cracked too. Because we both knew. This partnership wasn't just business anymore. Not romantically. But emotionally, we were tied in a way no one expected. And Jason? Jason was drifting. I didn't sleep for 2 nights. Work continued. Clients demanded timelines. But inside, I was unraveling. Had I broken my marriage with ambition? Was I chasing something Jason could never be part of? Or was I simply becoming who I was always meant to be, and the real problem was, he didn't want to come with me? 1 week later, Jason came home. Quiet, calm, but distant. He sat at the table. The same table where it all began. And he asked, if it came down to me or the business, what would you choose? I couldn't answer. Not because I didn't know, but because, maybe I did. And the answer terrified me. There are moments when silence is louder than any scream. Jason's question, would you choose me or the business? Hung in the air like smoke. I didn't answer that night. He went to bed early. I stayed up staring at the ceiling, the weight of my own silence sinking deeper with every tick of the clock. The next morning, Drew and I had a pitch meeting with Meridian Hotels. A huge deal. Multi-region. Long-term. The kind of project that could triple our growth overnight. But as Drew reviewed the mock-ups and tightened the proposal, I sat there, distracted. Jason's question replayed on loop. Do you even see me anymore? And now Drew sat beside me, running numbers, crafting strategies, seamlessly filling in the gaps my mind was too fogged to handle. Lauren, he said, tapping the presentation. You okay to lead this pitch? I paused, nodded, and faked a smile so polished it might have fooled anyone but Drew. The Meridian boardroom was nothing short of intimidating. 12 executives, half of them in tailored navy suits that probably cost more than my rent. But as I stood up to speak, something clicked. My nerves transformed into clarity. We're not just offering design. We're offering identity, emotion, a reason for your guests to feel something when they see your brand. I felt Drew glance at me. Pride, respect, confidence. But Jason's shadow was still in my mind. And then, a woman at the table, Meridian's VP of Strategy, asked a curveball. How did your agency get started? I hesitated. Drew opened his mouth. But I interrupted him. I started this dream in a studio apartment, with 0 funding. My husband's best friend believed in it, invested, and became my partner. We didn't expect any of this, but here we are. Her brows raised. Your husband and your business partner are best friends? I nodded. And added, they used to be. Drew stiffened beside me. But the room didn't notice. Or didn't care. What they cared about was the pitch. We won. 2 hours later, the contract was in our inbox. $1.4 million deal. I should have been ecstatic. But when I got home, Jason wasn't there. His car was gone. No text. No note. Just absence. I found him later that night at his brother's place. He answered the door looking tired. Empty. You won, he said flatly. Saw the update on LinkedIn. We won, I corrected. This was never about just me. No, Lauren, he snapped. It was always about you. That cut deeper than he knew. You want me to apologize for succeeding? I asked. I want to feel like I matter again. I stepped back. Because deep down I knew, he wasn't just angry at Drew. He was grieving the version of me that needed him more than ambition. Back at the office, Drew noticed the shift. He's not okay, is he? No. Neither are we. Want me to step back? I hesitated. I don't know. That's when Drew did something I'll never forget. He drafted a formal exit clause. If this is costing you your marriage, I'll walk away. No hard feelings. No fight. I stared at him. You just walk away from all this? You're more important than a company, Laure. My throat tightened. Because in that moment, I realized. Jason was pulling away out of fear. Drew was willing to pull away out of love. And I was standing in the middle of a fault line. I didn't sign the clause. I didn't reject it either. But I took it home and set it on the kitchen table. 2 days passed. Jason didn't mention it. Didn't touch it. But on the 3rd morning, I walked into the kitchen. And it was gone. Instead, a note sat in its place. This isn't about Drew. It's about us. Let's figure that out first. I smiled. Just barely. Because for the first time in weeks, I felt like we were on the same side again. That week, I scaled back my hours. Not for Jason, but for myself. Because somewhere in chasing success, I'd forgotten what peace looked like. Drew understood. He picked up the slack. Handled clients. Respected the space I needed. And when Jason invited him to join us for dinner one night, the air between them wasn't warm, but it wasn't hostile either. They talked. Not like old friends, but like men rebuilding a bridge one cautious plank at a time. After dinner, Jason and I sat on the balcony. You were incredible in that pitch, he said. I looked over. How would you know? I watched the replay. Meridian posted a clip. Silence settled between us. Until Jason said something that nearly undid me. I didn't fall in love with the quiet girl. I fell in love with the one who lit up talking about dreams. I was just scared she'd run so far ahead, I wouldn't recognize her anymore. Then catch up, I whispered. The thing no one tells you about success is how quickly it invites scrutiny. 1 minute, you're a rising star, lauded, admired, applauded. The next? People start digging into the ground you're standing on, just to see if it holds. And the question that nearly shattered everything wasn't asked by Jason. Or Drew. Or me. It came from a client. A simple question. At the worst possible moment. 2 months after landing Meridian, our agency was thriving. We hired a junior strategist. Signed 3 more hotel groups. Drew even moved into the office next to mine. We were finally growing fast enough to justify it. Jason and I? We were still trying. Going to therapy. Having deeper conversations. Laughing more. Touching more. But the past still lingered like a shadow we kept stepping into. That's when Danielle, our new junior strategist, pulled me aside. Meridian's lead strategist just asked something weird. Weird how? I asked, sipping my coffee. She wants to know what exactly Drew's role is in the company. She said the numbers don't add up. My hand paused mid-sip. What numbers? Danielle shrugged. She said she ran a basic background check. He's not listed on the LLC filings. No equity registered. No paperwork with his name. She said she's not trying to stir things, but she has to report it to her compliance team. My heart dropped. Because she wasn't wrong. Drew and I had started with a handshake and a contract, not official paperwork filed with the state. I'd been so eager to get moving that I used my own name, my own LLC, my own accounts. We were supposed to formalize everything later. But later never came. I called Drew into my office. His smile faded the second he saw my face. What happened? You're not on the books. What? Your name. The equity. The filings. Nothing is official. He paused. We signed the agreement. But we never filed it. And now Meridian's asking questions. He ran a hand through his hair. Lauren, I gave you the seed money. We agreed on 20%. I trusted you. I looked at him. I know. And I trusted you to make sure we protected ourselves. Silence. Thick. Charged. Are you accusing me of something? He asked, voice tight. No, I said quietly. But clients don't care about trust. They care about documentation. He stood, walked to the window, and stared out. So what do? We make it right. File the proper paperwork. Get it official. Clean and legal. And if we don't? I swallowed hard. Then we risk losing Meridian. And maybe more. That night, I told Jason everything. He listened. Nodded. And then asked, do you want Drew to be part of this business forever? I blinked. That's a heavy question. So is marriage. So is partnership. You're making decisions that affect the next 20 years of your life. Maybe longer. Do you even know what you want anymore? I opened my mouth. Then closed it. Because deep down, I wasn't sure. The next day, I drafted a new agreement with a lawyer. Sent it to Drew. No emotion. No preamble. Just facts. It included a clause that protected his 20%. And a buyout option, should he ever choose to leave. He didn't respond for 2 days. When he finally called, his voice was quiet. I didn't think I'd feel so replaceable. You're not. But this isn't just friendship anymore. It's business. We need clarity. Silence. I'll sign it, he said finally. And I felt both relief and grief. At our next client meeting with Meridian, their VP smiled across the table. We reviewed your updated documents. Everything checks out now. Thanks for the transparency. But I couldn't stop thinking about what was lost in the process. Because in fixing what was broken, I'd made something feel colder. More transactional. Less like a dream. More like a contract. That night, I sat on the balcony with Jason. Do you think I'm losing myself? I asked. No, he said. I think you're finally seeing yourself clearly. And you're okay with that? He smiled. Small. Sad. Proud. I married a woman with fire. I just forgot how bright you could burn. You're not afraid of the flames anymore? I'm learning to stand closer. Later that week, Drew dropped by the office late. He had a bottle of wine, a signed copy of the agreement, and a card. Inside the card, he'd written, "We built something beautiful. Even if it doesn't last forever, it mattered." I hugged him, because there were no better words for it. We were building something, even if part of it had to break along the way. The thing about the past is, it never knocks. It barges in, uninvited, unannounced. And when it does, it never looks like what you expect. That morning, I was in the middle of reviewing a client proposal. The office smelled like espresso and fresh paper. Drew had just stepped out to grab lunch. Jason had texted me a cheesy "thinking about you" meme. It was one of those rare, peaceful days. Until the receptionist buzzed me. "Lauren, there's a woman here asking to speak with you. She says it's personal." "A client?" She didn't say. "But, she looks like she knows you." A cold wave ran down my spine. "Send her up." When the elevator doors opened, I recognized her instantly. Sasha Bennett. Drew's ex-girlfriend. The one he never talked about. The one who ghosted him 2 years ago and disappeared overseas. And now she was standing in my lobby, wearing a tailored navy suit, holding a designer briefcase, and staring at me like she'd never left. "Lauren," she said, stepping forward with a warm but unreadable smile. "You look amazing." "You have a lot of nerve showing up here," I said flatly. "I know. I deserve that. What do you want?" She hesitated, then held out a manila envelope. "I work for Lennox Capital now. We're your new investors. And I've been assigned to audit your account." I stared at her. "You're kidding." "Wish I was." "So you're here, professionally?" "Yes." "Not to see Drew?" "Not unless I'm forced to." I brought her into the conference room. Her eyes scanned every corner, every detail. She was taking mental notes, of me, of the office, of everything. "You built all this?" she asked. "With Drew." She nodded, slowly, like she didn't quite believe it. "You know he was wrecked when you left." "I didn't come here for Drew," she said quietly. "But for what it's worth, I never stopped caring. I just couldn't give him what he wanted." "And what was that?" "Stability." She handed over the envelope. Inside, spreadsheets, investment reports, compliance forms. "My team flagged a few things in your financials. We need to clarify your structure before we finalize the next round of funding." "And if we don't?" "Then your capital is on hold." An hour later, Drew walked in, saw Sasha through the glass, and froze. "Tell me that's not." "She's our investor now." He blinked, ran a hand down his face. "Unbelievable." "You okay?" "I will be." But the truth was, he wasn't. Over the next few days, Sasha returned for meetings. She was sharp, focused, professional. But Drew couldn't hide the flickers of emotion that surfaced when they spoke. And I couldn't help but notice, the way she still knew his habits. How she finished his thoughts. How he avoided eye contact whenever she smiled. One night, I stayed late to review some financial documents. Drew came into my office and sat down. "She hasn't changed," he muttered. "Still the same Sasha? Same smile. Same timing. Same ability to show up and ruin everything. She's just doing her job." "Yeah, but it's the job I gave up everything for." "You think she's here to sabotage us?" "No," he said after a long pause. "I think she's here because she regrets everything." The next morning, Jason met me for breakfast. I told him everything. He leaned back in his chair, stirring his coffee. "So does she still want him?" "I don't know." "Do you think he still wants her?" I hesitated. "I think he's confused. And I don't blame him." Jason reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Just, don't let this business come between your heart and your gut." "Okay." 2 days later, it happened. Sasha came into my office after hours, closed the door, and said something I wasn't ready for. "I want to buy Drew out." "Excuse me?" "I'm offering to purchase his 20%. Clean. Legal. Fair price." "Why?" "Because he's not thinking clearly. And because I want to give him peace." I stared at her. "You think peace is writing a check to push him out of his dream?" "No. I think peace is letting go of a fight he's not strong enough to win." "He's not weak." "No," she said. "But he's still in love with someone who doesn't love him back." Silence. "You mean you?" She looked me dead in the eyes. "No, Lauren. I mean you." I didn't respond. I couldn't. Because somewhere in the deepest part of me, I knew she was right. And that terrified me. Sometimes, the loudest truths are whispered in passing. A hallway. A conversation not meant for your ears. A moment that changes how you see everything. It happened on a Tuesday. The day started with client meetings, a flat white, and a tight deadline for an upcoming campaign. I hadn't seen Drew since the Sasha conversation, and Jason was buried in meetings of his own. I thought the tension would fade. I thought if I just kept going, it would all blow over. But the universe had other plans. I was walking back from the restroom, folder in hand, when I heard Sasha's voice echo from the far end of the hallway. I paused, instinctively. Not out of curiosity, but because of the tone. Soft. Regretful. She wasn't speaking to me. She wasn't speaking to anyone she thought could hear her. She was speaking to Drew. "You think she sees you?" Sasha asked. "Don't," Drew replied. "I'm serious, Drew. I've watched her for 2 weeks. She walks past you like you're a fixture." "She's busy. We both are." "No, she's blind. And you keep waiting for her to look back." A pause. "You're wrong," he said, but his voice cracked just enough. "You're not just her business partner," Sasha whispered. "You've always been more. And she knows it." I stepped away before I heard more. Not out of politeness. Out of panic. Because the worst part wasn't what Sasha said. It was the part of me that believed her. Later that evening, I sat alone in the office with my laptop open, trying to focus. Trying to work. But my brain kept circling the same thought. Have I been pretending not to know how Drew feels? And if so, why? Was it safer than confronting it? Easier than admitting Jason and I were more fragile than I let on? Or was it that somewhere, in the spaces between coffee meetings and pitch decks, a part of me had started needing Drew in ways I wasn't ready to define? Drew walked into my office, holding 2 drinks. One's decaf. "Don't worry." "Thanks." We sat in silence. The air heavy. The room too quiet. Finally, I asked, "What are we doing, Drew?" He blinked. "Right now? Having coffee." "No. You know what I mean." He looked down. "Lauren, I didn't ask to feel this way." "But you do. And you've known, haven't you?" I didn't answer. Because the truth was sitting right there between us. So obvious it no longer needed words. Jason came home late that night. He kissed my cheek. Asked about my day. I answered. But everything felt out of sync. Mechanical. Muted. We watched half an episode of some comedy we used to love. Laughed at all the wrong moments. He didn't press. Maybe he didn't want the answers. Maybe I didn't either. The next morning, I found Drew in the conference room alone. He'd brought in the buyout paperwork from Sasha. It sat unopened on the table. I didn't sign, he said. Why? Because I don't want out. Even if this gets messy, eh? Especially if it does. That's not fair to Jason. And it's not fair to me that I have to keep pretending like I don't care about you in ways I'm not supposed to. Silence. You don't get to say that, I whispered. I already did. That afternoon, Jason showed up unexpectedly. He had lunch in hand. A rare smile. And a question. You still love me, right? I blinked. Of course. But do you like me? Tears stung. Jason. Don't answer. Not yet. Just think about it. He placed the lunch on my desk, kissed my forehead, and walked out without another word. That night, I stood between two truths. One was safe, familiar, worn down by routine but built on history. The other was terrifying, unspoken, unfolding in real time. And I was at the center, holding both ends of the rope. The next morning, Drew wasn't in the office. No text. No call. Nothing. On my desk sat a note in his handwriting. Just 5 words. I won't be the villain. The day Drew didn't show up, the silence was louder than any confrontation. His absence pulsed through the office like a missing heartbeat. The chair he usually slouched in, empty. The half-drunken thermos of black coffee, gone. The scribbled design notes, vanished from the whiteboard. But what hit me hardest wasn't that he'd left. It was the way he did it. I won't be the villain. 5 words. No explanation. No closure. Just resignation dressed in nobility. By noon, Jason walked in holding a small bouquet of sunflowers. These felt like you. Because they're complicated and loud? I joked. Because they're bright and unmissable. We sat on the balcony, just the two of us. It was unusually cool for spring. The breeze felt like a reset. Jason looked at me, expression unreadable. Tell me if I'm fighting for something that doesn't exist anymore. Jay. No lies. No diplomacy. Just the truth. And it hit me. I hadn't cheated. I hadn't left. But I had changed. There's a moment in every marriage where you choose to rebuild. Or you choose to stop pretending the cracks aren't real. I wasn't ready to walk away. But I couldn't keep walking over eggshells either. I still love you, I said. But we need to be honest about how far we've drifted. And if I'm willing to row us back? Then I'll meet you halfway. But you have to know. I haven't been fair to you. He nodded. Slowly. His eyes didn't flinch. I knew something shifted when you started smiling with your eyes again, and it wasn't around me. That hurt. Because it was true. Later that night, I found Drew's apartment key still on the spare ring in my office drawer. I stared at it for a long time. Then I called him. Voicemail. You're not the villain. But you don't get to disappear. Not like this. 2 days later, Drew showed up. Not at the office. At the lawyer's. He'd filed a document, amendment to our partnership clause. The clause stated that should one partner leave for non-performance or personal conflict, their shares must first be offered to the remaining partner before any outside sale. He'd offered them to me. You built this with me, he said when we met. You should own it. You helped create every inch of it. And now I'm stepping away, because it's the only way I don't break everything else. You think I'm choosing Jason? No. I think you're choosing peace. And I can't give you that. We sat in his car for over an hour. Neither of us said what we really wanted to. Maybe because the ending had already written itself. You'll regret this, I said. Only if you don't make it count. He smiled. It was the saddest smile I'd ever seen on his face. And the most sincere. 6 months later, the business doubled in revenue. I restructured our leadership team. Jason and I started therapy. We didn't solve everything, but we stopped pretending we had to. Some bonds grow stronger when challenged. Others dissolve gracefully, making space for something better, even if that something is just clarity. Sometimes people come into your life to help you become who you were always meant to be, even if they can't stay. Final note to the viewer. If you stayed with me to the end, thank you. This story was more than business and heartbreak. It was about truth. About learning when to hold on, and when to let go. If this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of your own complicated turning point, please support the channel by subscribing. Your engagement helps us keep telling stories that matter.